Economic transformation is taking place at a stubbornly slow pace in South Africa for at least the last 23 years, and that's according to the Employment Equity Report that is out of the Commission of Employment Equity, and they've just handed the report over to the Department of Labour and Employment. And I am now joined by Minister Thulas Nxesi for a little bit more on his take on the report. Thank you so much for your time. The Commission has handed over the report to your department. Just give us an overview of what your take is when it comes to transformation in the country as outlined by the report.
Well, looking at that report, it's very significant. Significant in this sense that, as you have indicated in your intro, after so many years, the transformation is moving at a very, very slow pace. It's very concerning, especially when it comes to the positions in the management sector, in the private sector. So what has been recommended here is the strategies, or one of the strategies, to fast track or to make sure that we move rapidly in terms of the transformation. It cannot be that at this stage, most of those positions in the private sector are still controlled by the white people, or the white male in particular, because even the white females are not there. So clearly, this particular commission recommends these steps where we have to set very clear targets and we monitor those targets.
And that acceleration, and speaking of targets, of course, accelerating that obviously informs your policy and changes to the Employment Equity Act. Talk us through some of the noise that we've heard around those sectorial targets, recommendations, and just what the process that governments did actually take when coming up with those recommendations that we are expecting to see promulgated in September.
The noises are ill-informed, misleading the communities, as if we're talking about reverse racism. That's not true. That's not true. We must emphasize that. People must look at that particular report. And if you look at the processes which were followed to be where we are, it has been at the level of network. There was consultation in that commission. You have all the stakeholders represented, and they've agreed to all those issues. In fact, the commission has gone to the extent of meeting with some of the leaders of the different companies. They are the ones who came with those recommendations. And the major issue here is that the minister is given the power to set the targets which must be followed. But the minister is not doing that unilaterally. Doing that in consultation with the stakeholders, and therefore it's now not just a unilateral process. And further than that, once we set those targets, we're talking about targets of certain national sectors, economic sectors, looking at them in terms of what occupational levels, but sometimes the subsectors. One of the issues which has been misused is this issue of the economically active population. We have said, in terms of looking at the demographics, we can do the national demographics, but people also, companies have a right to use what you call the provincial or the regional demographies. So it's very clear that if you look at certain concentration of certain groupings in particular provinces, you might not be able to use the national what you call demographics. So what is very clear is that this process has been consultative, and further we have said let there be inputs from the public. We have put it for public comment, and in terms of that we are now consolidating all those inputs and see what proposals people are putting before there's a proper proclamation by the President on this matter. So we're very consultative at each and every stage of what we are dealing with.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. Of course, that's Minister Thulas Nxesi, who is the Minister of the Department of Employment and Labour, talking us through, of course, that employment equity report that was released for 2023 that looks in hindsight at the year before, and just talking about the importance of both government and private sector working together to ensure that we close that skills gap for more jobs to be able to be created and more people to be able to be employable. For Newzroom Afrika on channel 405 from Ntokozo Khumalo in Ekurhuleni.